Good morning, everybody. I am thrilled to be part of the SAS Global Forum. As a futurist, I get to spend a lot of my time going into research labs and talking to the scientists and innovators who are creating the world of tomorrow. And I get to play with some pretty cool stuff, like robots. Technologies that are absolutely going to change the status quo, create new industries, and disrupt a whole lot of others. When I look out over the next 10 years, I see a world that in many ways will be unrecognizable, and in 20 years might even seem like it's straight out of science fiction. The technologies that are being created today and coming online right now are going to create all kinds of new markets and generate huge new data sets. So let's begin our ride into the future with some of the technologies that are going to create new markets. Most of you would be very familiar with wearables. In fact, how many of you have a wearable on right now? Anybody? Oh yeah, we're in a techie crowd, quite a few of you. Today's wearables are really cool. They can measure your heart rate, your breathing, your exercise, your sleep. They're about to get a whole lot more personal. Scientists at UC Berkeley in California have designed a prototype sensor that is bendable, but that's not the only thing that's cool about it. It is so sensitive that it is able to do molecular level analysis of the sweat on your body and be able to do things like measure your hydration levels, look at your drug levels in your body to see whether you might need a top up of something like insulin or even whether you're using illicit drugs. They'll be able to do things like measure muscle fatigue, all from the chemicals that are in the sweat on your hands. There are already wearables coming online today that use this bendable and flexible technology. L'Oreal has released a UV sensor that is literally just a sticker that you put on your skin, and it alerts you when you've been out in the sun too long. There's a company called MC10 that has another sensor that is bendable and flexible. It's called Research Connect, and you can put it anywhere on your body, and it has all kinds of sensors in it, including EMG and EKG sensors and gyroscopes, and it's able to send this data right back to your doctor if you've given permission for that to go from your smartphone to a third party. There are whole new worlds of opportunities opening up in the world of biosensing and the quantified self. Personalized healthcare is going to be a huge market, and it's not just the wearables, it's going to be our clothing too. Our clothes will have sensors. In Australia, there's a mining company that's called Rio Tinto, and they have a smart cap that they've outfitted drivers with, and it looks like a baseball cap, but it's got sensors across the forehead, and it's able to detect when a driver is about to hit a micro fatigue and send an alert. In the future, you can imagine clothes with haptics built in as well as these sensors that won't just send you an alert, they'll give you a shake and shake you a little bit harder until you wake up. Augmented reality is another one of those really amazing technologies. So when I talk about augmented reality or AR, I'm talking about putting a digital overlay into your field of vision. So it'll look like it's sitting out here, even though your glasses are right up against your eyes. It's going to change the face of retail. If you can imagine that you're thinking about buying a car, and because you've got cameras in these glasses as well, you can look at something on a page in a magazine and see it leap up in 3 dimensions and use your hands to manipulate it and look inside. When I was at the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas in January, I was playing with an AR demo from Case Western Reserve University, and it was of anatomy. And you could have multiple people interacting in this AR demonstration at the same time. And literally, you could pull the skin off of a person and see the musculature and the veins and the arteries and go further and see the organs. Imagine that you're sitting in your doctor's office in the future and you have a complex medical condition and your doctor's trying to explain exactly what they're going to do in a surgery, and you're interacting in this augmented reality version. Another really great example and application for augmented reality is in the workforce. There's a company called Dacry that has designed this smart helmet that you see down here on the right. And what this does is it has a hard hat protection, but it also allows workers out in the field to have a view of what's inside pipes that they're looking at. It has infrared cameras so that you can see how hot or how cold something is. It has superimposed levers that allow you to know which direction you're going to turn a knob. A cousin to augmented reality is virtual reality. And here we're completely immersed in a digital world. And there are so many applications that we could be looking at here. One that I like is out of Philadelphia with Boeing. And what they're doing is they spray paint the Chinook helicopters there. They've been using virtual reality to train people to do the painting properly. They have an applicator that actually emulates the spray paint, the sound and the feel, but instead of spraying real helicopters, they're practicing on a virtual model, and it's decreasing the actual training time and increasing accuracy. Virtual reality is going to be huge in the entertainment world. Imagine being part of an interactive movie or part of a video game. The demos with virtual reality feel so real. I was playing with one from the University of Newcastle where I looked out over a chasm, and in the VR simulation, they want you to walk off of this, and basically it's like you're jumping off a canyon. And I got closer and closer, and my feet just did not want to go to the edge. It felt that real. Eventually, they coaxed me to step over, and my stomach actually went right up, just like it would on one of the rides here in Disney World. It's an incredible technology. Biometrics are going to be a huge part of our future as well. So whether it's fingerprints, facial recognition, iris scans, and so much more. Most of you would have already been through customs at some stage where you've got cooperative systems where it's basically just matching your picture up against a known photograph. Where it gets really interesting is with non-cooperative system where you have cameras that are at an angle in a ceiling and you can recognize faces in a crowd. There's a company in Australia called Imagis Technology that has designed algorithms that allow you to do that in real time. And it goes beyond just facial recognition. There's emotion detection too. And here what you're doing is you're marrying artificial intelligence with vision recognition. And there are so many applications for this. So imagine you're wearing AR glasses and you're watching a political debate on TV, and you get little pop-ups that tell you the actual emotion of the politician and whether they're lying or telling the truth or nervous or happy. You can actually read a whole lot more into what's going on. But there are some practical applications from a business perspective too. Imagine that you're negotiating a deal and you're wearing AR glasses and your opponent on the other side of the table isn't. And you're able to detect the emotions of the people that you're doing a negotiation with. And you might think, oh, well, you know, these glasses look pretty funky. They're going to know that I'm wearing AR. But guess what? The glasses that are coming out now are starting to look more and more like regular reading glasses or prescription glasses. There's a company called View that has a prototype out right now that you could not distinguish from a pair of regular glasses. And it's not just about recognizing individual people, it's also about recognizing the characteristics of a crowd, demographics. And one of the first places we're going to see this is in the area of digital advertising. There are systems that have already been deployed that are able to determine what kind of people are in front of an advertising sign and display an ad accordingly. So you can imagine in a supermarket like I've pictured here, Woolworths in Australia, it might make sense to advertise something like a family pie when you've got a mum with kids, as opposed to a bunch of teenage boys. And in fact, that's exactly what they're doing. It's a way of increasing advertising revenue and making it a whole lot more relevant to the people who are in front of the sign. Now, what all of these technologies have in common is that they're connected to the internet. And there are going to be so many different things connected to the internet, everything from our gadgets, our homes, our cars, and even our bodies. I'd like to give you a couple of examples of things that you may not have thought of. IoT is going to be extremely important in the agricultural industry, and in particular in dairy. In the picture on the left, the green sensor is called moo-call, and it gets mounted on a cow's tail, and as the cow is wagging its tail, and it's a pregnant calf, the more it beats, the closer it is to giving birth. And as the sensor detects that the cow is about to give birth, it sends an alert to the dairy farmer, and they're able to take appropriate action. Another example in the dairy industry is Moo Monitor, which is that blue monitor. And on that one, it goes on the neck, and it's able to detect when a cow is in heat. And in the dairy industry, that's actually really important because right now about 50% of the heats go undetected, and that's a big revenue loss. So they can detect when the cow is in heat, and integrating it with electronic gates, they can then steer the cow into an area for artificial insemination. We're going to see sensors embedded in almost everything that you can imagine. One of the technologies that's underpinning this whole Internet of Things phenomenon is an addressing scheme called IPv6. And with this addressing scheme, you can connect up to 340 trillion things to the internet. So you can imagine a world where literally everything that gets shipped out is going to have an RFID tag, similar to a barcode that you might have now. A couple of years ago, Ericsson and Maersk started to do integration of RFID tags into the containers that they're using for shipping lines. But what you can do with this is actually check the provenance of everywhere that a particular good has been, every part that is assembled in a particular product, and check things like temperature and how long it's been stored somewhere, and it will be useful to consumers as well as to businesses. One of the places where we're going to see increasing connectivity and huge market opportunities is in turning our cities into smart cities, literally bringing them alive and by connecting them to the internet with sensors. And there are so many great examples. Things that are simple, like not collecting garbage unless a garbage can is actually full. There'll be more interesting and sophisticated applications like sensors that are able to detect where people are on bus or train routes and reroute accordingly. There's a cool one that has been deployed in Sydney, where I live, called Mousetrap. And it's a sensor that is able to sniff out graffiti paint or permanent markers. And they've deployed it on Sydney trains. So when the odors are detected, it triggers a CCTV camera feed back into the train office, into the police, and they can catch the graffiti artist in real time. We're going to see all kinds of smart parking applications. So you're probably familiar with garages that that have those red and green lights that indicate where there's a space available and maybe digital signage to help you navigate to a space. Imagine having that kind of capability citywide. In Canberra, our capital city in Australia, they're already doing a trial with just that. And not only will these smart parking allow you to find a space, you'll have an app that you can use to pay the parking meter so that there's no more searching around for coins or credit cards or having to run back to your car. Now, with smart cities, there's a lot that's happening with technology, but frankly, technology in and of itself isn't the only thing that's important. Public feedback is too. In Korea, in Seoul, they've put together an application called M-Voting. And what this allows the government to do is get public feedback on a whole range of issues in real time. So it's starting a real-time dialogue with citizens. And they can push out questions to people in particular neighborhoods or particular genders or particular job categories. Again, mesh this with some other data sets and you can start to get some really interesting real-time analytics out of this. I've talked about Canberra a little bit. They're doing a lot with smart cities. One of the things that they've invested in is using LiDAR from an airplane to do 3D mapping of the entire city. So they've built up a 3D model, and what they're going to use it for initially is to look at property development applications. So if someone wants to change a property, no longer will you be reliant just on looking at a two-dimensional drawing. You'll be able to look at it in 3 dimensions, and you might be using augmented reality or virtual reality to do a walk around of exactly what a new development will look like. Another government department in Australia, PSMA, is going steps beyond this. They have a project that is doing continent-wide 3D imaging and analysis using satellite data, analytics, and artificial intelligence. And this is the agency that also holds all the geocoded address for every building in the country, the zoning laws, the property boundaries, everything else. Imagine meshing it together. One of the first things that they're working on is determining where there are pools. So they're doing a trial in an 8 square kilometer area in Adelaide. And in order to use this image recognition, which is really artificial intelligence, and get it accurate, they're combining the AI outputs, which say this looks like a pool, but in fact it may not really be a pool. It may be a blue area that's covered with a tarp or some other building that is misdetected. So to make it accurate, what you need to do is know that you've got a verified image. So they've matched it with a crowdsourcing platform where people are looking at the images that the AI thinks are a pool and saying, yes, this really is a pool, or no, it's not. And in doing so, it's training the AI as to what the image match really is. Now add to this some trigonometry and some analytics, and suddenly you would end up with a complete 3D map of heights and roof angles and vegetation for an entire continent. Now, it's not just planes and satellites that will be doing imaging. They'll be done from robots too. This is a robot eye from a company called Ocular Robotics, and it's able to do a gigapixel scenario in seconds. Now, imagine that you've got this robot eye mounted in a police car that's going up to a crime scene, and immediately you've got a 3D scan of everything exactly the way it was when the police arrived. Months or years later, perhaps there's a trial, and instead of just presenting evidence to the jury and the people doing the investigations are able to do a virtual reality walkthrough. There are many applications of this type of technology. One that's already being done is in Rome, using this robot eye mounted on a robot, and it's imaging the catacombs of Rome, and they're using it for tourism purposes. So I think I live in one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I've got the Harbor Bridge, the Sydney Opera House, and of course the beautiful harbor. It's an icon of Australia and of Sydney. It's also an engineering icon because it's one of the widest and longest and tallest steel arch bridges in the world. It's got another distinction. It's the only steel arch bridge in the world that has two autonomous robots, Sandy and Rosie, working on it doing maintenance. This came out of a collaboration that started about 7 years ago between New South Wales Roads and Maritime and the University of Technology, Sydney. And the problem that they wanted to address was how can we make grit blasting safe for the humans who are doing maintenance? How do we keep the bridge healthy? Because it does need that kind of maintenance on a regular basis. They took their inspiration from nature, from an inchworm, and designed Croc, which is a completely autonomous robot that is able to do 3D imaging and mapping in real time, feed the information back into a GIS system to be analyzed by bridge engineers, and if necessary, then conduct the grit blasting maintenance. Our cities of tomorrow are going to change quite radically from where they're at today. Would you believe that in 1800, only 3% of the world's population lived in cities? By 2010, this had already reached over 50%. By 2025, demographers believe that about 60% of the world's population are going to live in cities. And going beyond that, we can get up as high as 70% of the world's population in cities. Now, the cities are going to be technologically enabled, but the buildings are also growing taller. And there's a bit of a race happening right now, particularly in Asia, to build taller and taller buildings and faster elevators. In fact, in Shanghai, at the World Tower there, they have an elevator that is able to travel at 46 miles per hour. It's a 127-foot floor tower. We're also going to see things like this huge pothole become a thing of the past. This was a picture from a couple of years ago in Bangalore, India, where a burst water pipe in a major thoroughfare created a 12-foot pothole that was left unfixed for over a month. And people were getting so tired of it that one guy, this artist, decided to take matters into his own hand. He put together a mock crocodile, moved it into the pothole, painted it like a moat. The pictures went viral, and the next day the city workers finally came out to fix this major pothole. In the world of tomorrow, it's probably going to be robots that are doing this. There is a super ambitious project that is being conducted by Leeds University in the UK with £4.2 million of funding. And they are designing a fleet of robots, tiny little robots that will be doing repairs of the city in real time. The way the scientists in this project describe it is that these little robots will be the immune system for the city. They'll be acting like white blood cells, and they'll be able to sense when things are wrong and take immediate mitigating action. So one of the modes that they'll be working in is perch and repair. They'll be flying up on top of things like light poles and changing lights. They'll also be looking at things like potholes and fixing them in real time. I was talking to one of the scientists there about how would they detect the potholes, and I conjectured that maybe they'd have drones flying over and be using that as the way to detect that a pothole is there. However, what they're really thinking of is using the data from driverless cars, which will be packed with sensors, to be able to detect potholes in real time because they're already measuring things. They're also looking at launching robots deep into the utility pipes of the city and possibly having them as swarm bots, little tiny robots that have independent CPUs that are able to assemble and disassemble into different shapes and sending real-time data about the things that are happening deep underground and taking mitigating action. We're going to see robots everywhere in all kinds of shapes and sizes, and some of them are going to be quite disruptive, especially driverless cars. And they'll come in lots of different shapes and sizes as well. So many of you would have been familiar with these pod-like electric vehicles from Google and some of the others. There's actually a taxi trial that's happening in the UK with these pod vehicles. Ford has made a major investment in this area in vehicles that have no steering wheels, no brakes, no accelerators. And in fact, there's a commercial fleet that they're planning to launch in the 2021 timeframe that is designed for rideshare companies like Uber and Lyft. When I was at CES, I saw some other really interesting examples of the future of vehicles. One is this Vision van from Mercedes. It actually is an autonomous vehicle, although there is room for a driver who uses a joystick. What's interesting about it is that the cargo area is robotic and controlled, and that they have drones on the roof which do the last mile delivery directly from the van. Another really cool one that I saw is right next to it. It's from Honda, and it has an AI called Hana. It's an electric vehicle, and you can say to Hana, top me up when the rates are best. So in other words, when the electricity price is cheapest. You can also say to Hana, go and earn me some money, please, and it will go out and do an Uber type of thing and pick up people, and you're at work and your car is busy earning money for you all by itself. We're going to see other robots on our streets and pavements. Meet Drew. Drew is from Domino's in Australia, and the impetus behind this particular innovation is, why should we use a vehicle that weighs between 1.5 and 2 tons to deliver a pizza that weighs a couple of grams? So they teamed up with a local robotics company and designed this cute little guy that has hot and cold compartments, and it can navigate autonomously. It's being trialed on the streets of Brisbane, and it is already a hit with the people that have picked up pizzas. In fact, one of the things that they wanted to do was a market test to make sure that people would be willing to go out to the gate to pick up the pizza rather than having Doug the pizza boy knock on their door. And I suspect part of the reason people were so accepting is that this robot is so cute, but also because it is a novelty at this stage. Vehicle-to-vehicle communications is also going to be a very important part of the future, and where advanced analytics is going to play a very important role. We're going to have sensors not only on the cars that are detecting things like pedestrians or animals or cyclists or other vehicles. They will be communicating with each other and with the cloud. So we heard the other day about how tires are able to detect ice patches and communicate it to other cars. That is just the tip of the iceberg. We're going to see the infrastructure like traffic cameras and speed limit signs also have sensors embedded in them, and they will be relaying back to the vehicles, I'm red and I'm going to be red for another 10 seconds. The speed limit signs will tell you exactly how fast or how slow you should be going a particular area. There are going to be a lot of ramifications to these technologies, particularly for government organizations that rely on traffic infringement revenue to make their living. Suddenly, you might find that your cars are no longer ever violating the law because they're all autonomous. There's going to be a bit of a transition period, though, when we go from the car being sometimes in autonomous mode and sometimes being driven by a human. And we'll need things like black box technology to determine who was actually driving a car at any given point in time. There are also ethical considerations too. For instance, how will a car be programmed to react if you've got a situation where a collision is unavoidable or there's a pedestrian that steps out in front? Who gets hurt, the pedestrian or the occupants in the car? And what happens if there are different rules that are applied to different manufacturers and different programmers? There will be whole new job categories of digital ethicists that will have to try to decide, how do we make these machines work with us in our human environment when so much of what we do in driving is a human reflex? Now, as we look at robots, and in particular autonomous robots, we need to think about greater levels of spatial precision. Today's GPS systems only give about a 5 to 10 meter accuracy. One of the things that a government department in Australia is doing, and this is Geoscience Australia, is looking to take this down to between 3 and 5 centimeters of accuracy. And they're testing a number of different modes. One is space-based, and they're doing a deal with Immersat to begin testing a new transponder signal to be able to help triangulate with much greater precision exactly where in the world different things are. Drones are going to be a part of our landscape as well, and they're going to come in lots of shapes and sizes, and they'll be generating a lot of really interesting data. I would say that almost all of them will be equipped with cameras. They'll be doing things like videography for real estate, but they'll also be used for insurance assessment, and in particular, when you combine it with image recognition, be able to assess damage from floods or fires. I'm already seeing some of my clients in the utilities and telecommunications sectors use drones to do asset inspection and again make real-time decisions on the condition of things from an aerial view. There's another really interesting drone, the Alpha drone, which is a security drone that uses sensors on the ground to map out the perimeter of a building. And when the sensors on the ground detect motion, the drone flies up and sends real-time video images to the owner of the property. There are other drones like this little beach ball shaped drone called Gimbal that is designed for disaster areas. And because it's in a carbon fiber cage, if you've got jutting infrastructure because of an earthquake or something, it actually just bounces off of it. Or if there's an injured person, it doesn't injure that person with the blade. So it's able to go into areas where you wouldn't normally be able to send an automated machine. There are flying ambulance drones being trialed in Europe, too. This little yellow thing down here actually has a defibrillator, and it can get to a patient with a cardiac arrest much faster than an ambulance can and actually save its life. One of my personal favorites that I saw at CES is this one down here, which is actually a flying taxi. It's designed to carry people. It's completely autonomous, and if you weigh under 200 pounds, it's able to fly you. It's not approved yet for use, but there are other companies that are looking to do this sort of thing too. So we might end up with flying taxis in our environment. In the world of agriculture, we're going to see drones in lots of different shapes and sizes. These pictures are from the Australian Centre for Field Robotics, and the fixed-wing aircraft are able to do satellite quality imagery at a fraction of the cost. And they have sensors in them that generate so much data, it's unbelievable. They can fill up a gigabit per second pipe, literally chock full with data. They can do things like detect different types of weeds, like alligator weeds. They can count the flower buds on particular plants so that you would know when to harvest them. They can look at moisture levels or fungus. And when something is detected that needs intervention, another smaller autonomous robot can follow directly on and take mitigating action like spraying herbicide or pesticide in spot spraying. It's a pretty incredible world when you start combining all of this information together. And I believe that we are going to see highways in the sky. There are some serious proposals right now that are being looked at to segregate airspace and to have drones that are autonomous and flying at higher speeds of, say, 100 kilometers or more, between 200 and 400 feet, and drones that are manually controlled flying lower, and to have no-fly zones as well. Robots are going to be everywhere. And one of the trends that I saw at CES is that they are being designed to look really cute and cuddly and sweet and interact with humans. And there are so many, it's unreal. One of them that is interesting is this little roly-poly one, the Lubot, and it has artificial intelligence in it as well. So the kid is talking to this little robot, and it's actually connecting to the cloud and having a dialogue with your child, for better or worse. Many of the robots that I saw had Amazon Alexa integrated in with them, and we saw some demos from Amazon Alexa. My experience was very similar to what we saw on the stage the other day, is that sometimes the robots and the voice recognition works and sometimes it doesn't. We're also going to see a lot of robots in the industrial area, and in particular in warehousing. This is from Locus Robotics, and it's designed to take the walking chore, if you like, out of warehouse workers' jobs. There are other robots that are being designed that take the workers completely out of the loop. And that starts to get worrying when you start taking all kinds of people out of the loop. What kind of jobs will people have if they get displaced by automation? Now, the robots that we see today, one of the limitations that they have is that their grasp isn't very good. Well, that might change in the not too distant future. This is a robotic arm that's a prototype being designed by Yale scientists, and it was modeled by 3D imaging of a person's hand and then creating a robot that actually matched that 3D model. And this robot has the kind of grasp that allows it to pick up CDs or a roll of tape. One of the first applications for something like this will be in outer space, where you've got astronauts trying to do repairs, say, on the space station. So rather than trying to do it in a bulky spacesuit, you'd control it from a glove inside. But really, where the scientists want to go with this is to be able to take this and grow tendons and artificial skin on top and use it as prosthetics for humans who might have lost a hand or been born without a hand. Eventually, we will see full-on flesh-covered robots that may look very much like humans. So you can't really talk about robotics without talking about artificial intelligence. And there have been some tremendous advances happening in this area. So when I think of AI, a lot of times it just sounds so futuristic. Many people find it hard to believe that work began all the way in 1956. Early AI systems were based on what they called expert mode systems, where literally you tried to interview an expert to find out the decision tree that he or she would use and mimic it in programming code. With today's cognitive intelligence, that's not what you're doing at all. What you're doing is training the AIs by throwing masses of data at them. So it might be databases, it could be YouTube videos, it could be documents from your organization, almost anything that you can think of, including social media feeds. There have been some very significant milestones in the world of AI. One of the first was when IBM beat the world reigning chess champion. That was back in '97. Another milestone in 2011 was with IBM Watson winning Jeopardy! And that's an important one because that used natural language interpretation and mimicking of human thinking in neural networks to actually win the game of Jeopardy! Last year, there was an even bigger upset when Google's DeepMind AlphaGo robot beat the reigning Go champion. And that was considered, if you like, the pinnacle of artificial intelligence for determining human-like behavior. And it's getting faster and faster and more sophisticated all the time. One of the areas where we're going to see artificial intelligence really start hitting the professional workforce is with robo-advisors. And unlike this picture here, they're not hardware robots, they're software robots. So in the world of financial advice, robo-advisor services are already being offered to the general public, which purport to give better returns on investment for stocks and mutual funds and all sorts of things than a human advisor would. If you look at the growth trends that they project, a human advisor might give a growth trend that looks something like this, but a robo-advisor, because it's analyzing masses of data, is projected to give a return like this. There are other applications as well. One that I particularly like is in the field of oncology, and this is with IBM Watson. And what they're doing here is using AI as an assistive intelligence rather than replacing a human. So in the world of medicine, in particular in oncology, there are research reports that come out every single day, all kinds of new clinical trials, all kinds of papers published, and the patient records can be very, very lengthy and go over an extended period of time. By matching artificial intelligence to do this big data scanning and then presenting it to the professional oncologist, you're able to get the best of both worlds. There's another AI in the UK called Ross that's being used by a legal firm in its bankruptcy practice. And once again, it's being used to assist the humans rather than displace them. And what it's doing is it's going through the reams of papers that are affiliated with the bankruptcy proceedings and then feeding its conclusions to the human lawyers to take the next step of action. For people who are impacted in this whole automation and artificial intelligence area, it's going to be very important to look at what you can do that can't be automated all that easily and add value to your clients. So an example of this is from the fintech world, where a company that I know called MX is using advanced analytics to put together portals designed for financial organizations to offer to their clients. So rather than just have a view of whatever you might have in a particular bank, with your permission, it can see all the rest of your credit cards, it can see your paychecks, it can see your spending patterns, and it can look at things like insurance and all sorts of other things that are part of your financial environment. And with predictive analytics, be able to make specialized offers to people that are based not only on what a particular bank or financial institution can bring to the party, but also what their partners and wider ecosystem can bring. If you match this kind of analytics with artificial intelligence and, let's say, facial recognition and emotion detection, or detecting the emotion from your voice as well, you can start to do some really interesting things in terms of deepening your relationship with your customers. There's another really interesting AI in the financial area, and this AI is called Eric. And what Eric is doing is looking at how people normally navigate a banking website, the menus that they use and the patterns that they use to get through the site, and detecting when something anomalous is happening in terms of your individual use of that banking site. So let's say you might be under duress, and being able to send alerts to people in the fraud team to see what's happening in real time to detect fraud and stop it right in its tracks. So there's some really interesting things that can be done, once again, when you combine analytics and the power of artificial intelligence. Now, speech recognition is also very, very interesting. And when I was at CES, I saw Amazon being integrated into almost everything. It was unbelievable. Everything from dishwashers to cars, and we saw it's being integrated in with SAS as well. I consider that still a very rudimentary system. Google has come out with another iteration similar to Amazon Alexa of Google Assist, where you say, okay, Google, Google instead of Alexa. And it's actually, if you like, a next generation AI that's more conversational. I haven't had a chance to play with it myself, but reportedly it is even more accurate. What will happen, though, over the course of time, and I'm talking like the next 2 or 3 years, is that we're going to start seeing voice interfaces in with a lot of different things in our environment. And as they become more and more accurate at being able to pick out different accents and reacting appropriately rather than inappropriately, we might start to see voice as one of our primary interfaces. There's also another interesting aspect of voice recognition, which is emotion detection from voice based on the words that you're using and the tone and intonation of the things that you're talking about. And once again, if you can imagine a whole range of customer-facing situations or call center situations where you're able to figure out in real time the emotion of the person that you're talking to if you can't see them, there are, once again, some predictive analytics that can be put to play by marrying that information. So what does that mean for all of us as humans? We've got all these different technologies that are coming online right now. Are we going to take them into our body like Neil has? Will we become another species? In the near term, what I think many people will be doing, and I'm talking about a 5 or 7 year horizon, is to use a technology that is in the labs right now, which is smart contacts. And with smart contacts, what you will be doing is combining augmented reality with biotech. And there are already a number of research projects and patents on this now. So if you can imagine a contact lens that has built into it a translucent camera where you blink and you start to either take pictures or videos, you're starting to enter a world where how would you know that somebody actually has these augmented reality glasses on? Because you wouldn't know unless you're really up close and personal looking at their eyeball. Now, why would people want to do this? Well, it's actually the biotech side that makes it really, really useful, because one of the other things that is happening is work on autofocusing. So I use reading glasses and I have to pop them on and off all the time. having auto-focusing soft contacts that also give me a digital overlay of all kinds of information about the real world would be tremendously useful. It goes way beyond this as well, because it turns out that there is a chemical in our tears called lacriglobin that enables us to detect things like insulin levels, and you can detect precancerous situations just from your eyewear, and they're even looking at drug delivery from the eyewear. As we go out even further into the future, we're likely to have, according to people like Ray Kurzweil, DNA 3D printed nanobots that we inject directly into our brain that connect us to the internet. Imagine thinking a question where today you would Google search it and all you do is think it. Imagine wanting to send an email, but you're really just sending a thought. Imagine needing a new skill and you just download it or stream it from the net. Match that with genetic engineering, and wow, there are some amazing things happening in that world too. With genetic engineering, there's a scientist that I've recently heard say he believes that aging is actually a gene process that you can switch on and off. There's some incredible things happening in that space. So from the perspective of SAS practitioners in the world of analytics, the thing to think about is what kinds of new data sets are being generated by these technologies, and how can you use them to either help your organization or your customers' organizations make money, save money, or solve a problem. The future is really bright for those of you who are practitioners of analytics and who also have experience in artificial intelligence. So thank you very much.